Well, I first came to DACC as a student back in, let's see, it was 1967 to 1969. I we encouraged students to do a lot of career planning. I didn't do much career planning. I just knew I wanted to get a job that paid well. So when a group of us from our high school toured the college, they said to me, if you want to make good money and have a lot of job opportunities, computer programming is something you should do. Were you good in math? And I happened to be pretty good in math, so I decided to go into computer programming. So after getting an associate's degree at DACC, a group of us were hired by Western Electric, who was a big defense contractor during the Vietnam War, and wound up in the suburbs of Chicago as computer programmers.
Well, Vernon Miller was I remember one time I was say last year of school, and I had to have a class of senior grammar, and Mary Miller taught it, and another lady, I can't even think of her name, but kind of scared of Mary. And, but anyway, Mary Miller was the one taking down who's going to be in whose class and so forth. And I went up to Miss Miller and I said, Miss Miller, I'd like to register for Miss So-and-so class. She said to me, are you afraid of me? And I should have said, hell yes, because I was. But I said, no, I just can't work it out my classes.
My first teaching job was at Danville High School. I had student taught there in the fall of 1963, and that's when I first met Miss Miller. And then the next year, I was hired as a full-time business teacher at Danville High School. And my first connection with the college then was the first week or so of school, I got a note from Miss Miller's office. Somebody delivered and said, come to my office. So I went, and after a short conversation, she asked me if I would teach the beginning and advanced shorthand at night for the college. It was a transfer course, and she knew I had a degree in business education. And I said yes, and I've never regretted that decision.
Well, I worked up in the Chicago area for about a year, and it was certainly quite a bit different than Vermilion County. And all of my family was down here. DJC back then, Danville Junior College, was looking for an instructor that had some industrial experience. And so they asked me to come down to interview for that position. They interviewed, I think, 3 or 4 people, and I had all of the instructors that were doing the hiring, and they thought I had the ability to be a good teacher, so they offered me a position.
Because at the end of the first year of teaching, I got another note, handwritten note from Miss Miller asking me to come to the office, and she invited me to join her full-time at the college on East Main Street, because we moved here in '65, and also to start the business division. So I basically was the founder of the business division and served as the first division chair.
I was very fortunate to come back to even work and teach with an associate's degree, because back in those days, career and tech ed instructors only had to have 2,000 hours documented work experience. But I learned very quickly that in higher ed especially, everything is credential driven. So for a while I only taught with an associate's degree, but then I went back, and this was before online learning, so I went back and got a bachelor's degree at the U of I, working on that evenings and weekends. Then eventually I got a master's degree at the U of I, and then eventually I got all the coursework for a PhD. And because I got those additional credentials, that's probably what allowed me to advance through administrative ranks at the college.
The entryway to the college off of the students' parking lot, and Alice Marie, we must have cut that up several times before we got it where we wanted it. And it's a wooden structure, just as you come off of the parking lot into the campus park, the walkways and that. And then the next was the greenhouse, which I'm still paying on that. I didn't realize, but I've paid like $50,000 a year for 8 or 9 years or more, and I've got 2 more payments to make, $100,000. And after that, then we got into the Advanced Technical Center, and that was a planned gift though, $3 million. They don't get the money till I fold my wings, but that's a nice structure, and I think there's a lot of good is going to come out of that.
Actually, all of us who were here that first year in 1965 were involved. We taught our classes during the day, and then at night we would paint walls, paint in the hallways, clean, do minor renovations, and try to basically fix the place up so that it seemed more like a college. Because actually, Building 7 was the first building that we occupied. That very first year we were in that building, and then the basements of Building 5 and 6. But there were just lots of things that needed to be done that there wasn't money to do. And Miss Miller was right there with us. She worked and so on, and occasionally she worked on Sunday, and her philosophy was if she worked on Sunday, then we could too. And we did.
When I came here, they had just been deeded 7 buildings from the Veterans Administration, and they were in a semicircle. This building that we're in right now, Vermillion Hall, was called Building 7. And to the east, there was Building 7 was in the middle. To the east, there was Building 8, 9, and 10. And then to the west, there was buildings 6, 5, and 4. And then they had some buildings too over in the parking lot where the Brimmer's at now that eventually were torn down.
People would sing, people would dance, people would put on skits. One of the famous pictures is the one with a bunch of guys in tutus dancing. It was a lot of fun. And of course, Miss Miller was a drama teacher at Danville High School, so she had a little background in that and certainly helped keep that moving. That was one of the things that she wanted to see continue here as well.
Back in those days, we had a very active computer club, and we did a lot of fundraising. We used to have a homecoming parade with homecoming floats and that kind of thing. But you're right, there were a lot of time to spend in the computer lab. And that's probably one thing that helped me get my job, was the instructors couldn't be there all those hours, so they would hire student workers to be lab assistants, sophomore student workers, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the sophomore students that they hired to work a lot of evenings in the computer lab to help other students, especially freshman students.
We started doing that because we were teaching students how to interview for a job and how to get a job. And I had met a lady who taught at Indiana University who did this for the four-year students, and asked her if she would be willing to come and do it for us for mileage and a small fee and so on. And we just felt it was important if a student were invited to lunch for a job interview that they know what to do. She taught etiquette while we were eating the meal, as well as ask interview questions. So we accomplished two things at once, and I felt it was a great experience for the students.
Was the one I'm very fond of, and has done a fantastic job at the college, is Alice Marie Jacobs. And that college out there is, I would say, 80% or 90% because of her. Fabulous woman. Oh yeah, well that thing, all the work that Alice Marie Jacobs have done out there, and I thought there's not a thing named in her honor. And so on a foundation board meeting, I made an motion to name that after her, even though I was leaving $2 million for it. And that's a dedication that she deserves.
I think DACC is the greatest asset Vermilion County has, because we do so many things. We have programs and things for everyone, of all ages, starting with the Child Care Center. They learn there. College for kids in the summer, the middle college for students who are potential dropouts in high school, up through adults. There are programs for retirees. I personally have enjoyed a lot of the trips and things that are done through community education.
Immediate family, my wife attended Danville Area Community College, took accounting classes and real estate classes, went to work for a big developer in Danville at the time called a fellow by the name of Art Fleming, and became his office manager. Later, Tom Burkett brought her over to the chamber, and eventually she was running the Chamber of Commerce. And then more recently, she's gone back to real estate and is the office AE for now Central Illinois Board of Realtors, and still works part-time. Our son Kyle came 30 years ago now. By then it was Danville Area Community College, and he was a transfer student who majored in marketing and public relations, and then went on to Illinois State, and then later in his career went on to get an MBA from Olivet. And today he's one of the owners of Bell Racing USA, and they provide racing helmets for anywhere from kids in karting, sprint cars, all the way to, he's got a lot of NASCAR drivers, IndyCar drivers, sprint car drivers. Their partners in Europe have a lot of Formula One drivers. So he's providing helmets for professional race car drivers all over the world. My sister went to DACC and graduated with a degree in office systems, and went on to be an office manager. I have a niece that went through the criminal justice program here at the college, and she is now a Vermilion County deputy sheriff, works down at the public safety building. So those are pretty much the immediate family.
And fortunately, after Miss Miller retired, she spent the next 2 to 3 years writing a history of Danville Junior College from 1946, the first year it was an extension center for the University of Illinois. And in that book, the chapters are by years, It ends in 1965, the year that we moved to this campus. But in the back of it, every single class is listed with who the officers were for the class. Okay. A president, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer. And also there's a summary in this of the main things that happened each year. The chapters are in detail with the names of committees and people on the committees and when they met and that sort of thing. But her keeping track of all of this, I mean, here we are, chapter 1, the important dates and so on, kind of a summary at the end. But I am so thankful that she did this, and it has been such a help to anyone who's trying to learn anything about the history of DJC. It's here.
Oh, well, I remember they tore down a couple of buildings behind, it wouldn't be Lincoln Hall, I don't think, but over as you come in, the one to the right, there were a couple of buildings behind there, but you don't notice it. And gosh, I remember going in the building, the high ceiling, it was like they had, the old days, they hadn't done anything to it, they didn't have the money. And the facilities in there, I mean, they were crude, but I mean, they were workable. And that's what I remember at the very beginning. But gosh, to look at it today, it's a fabulous campus. I mean, I don't know what Dr. Naco could do to improve on it, but I'm sure with his knowledge, he'll find something.
Well, Miss Miller always referred to our campus as the miracle on East Main Street. And support started for the college way back in the 1960s. And the very first open house was held here on November 10th in 1965. It was sponsored by the foundation and the Alumni Association. And they held a fundraiser and labeled it tile signing. And what that was, for each person who would pledge $1 a week for 3 years, could take a card and sign it, and they would put that on a ceramic tile, and the tiles then would be displayed in a prominent place on campus. Now, $1 a week doesn't sound like much, but back in 1960, that was a fair chunk. When you're living on a salary of $4,000 a year, that's about what I made the first year I taught school. And those tiles are displayed today over in Bremer on the east hallway just outside the theater. And I would encourage anybody watching this who hasn't seen it to go over and look at them. They've been there since about 1965.
I think that everybody needs some advanced training beyond high school. Does everybody have to necessarily have a 4-year degree? For some vocations, absolutely, and probably even more. But for other vocations that's more skill-based, like welding, like truck driving, like wind energy, those are 2-year associate degree programs that we offer here on the campus, along with many others. Manufacturing, where kids can go, graduates, I call them kids, where graduates can go out and make a very, very good living. You know, it's not uncommon for a truck driver or a wind energy tech or a underwater pipe welder to make $100,000 a year, if that's something you love to do. But you need some training beyond high school.
You get up the industry here in Danville that needs technical people. And especially, I was out at the Krupp plant less than a month ago. Went through both their plants, and I saw these kids in gray T-shirts. And what that meant, that they were high school kids or they were students out of the college that were training to possibly be members of the teamwork out there. And that's the answer. We've got to train people if we're going to keep them here in Danville. We've got to give them a manufacturing or a technical education, or they're not going to make it. They'll leave. And I thought that's great. If they had them out there, they weren't doing anything, pulling on levers of any sort, but they had these gray T-shirts, and that told you right then they were students. And I thought that was great that Krupp put that together.
I keep in touch with a lot of them, yes. And that's one of the most rewarding things about teaching, especially in a community college, is going someplace and have someone come up and call me by name and reminisce about what class they were in and what we did and so on. And I would like to share with you one special event for students that they all seem to remember. In the early years, we took the business students on a 2-day field trip to Chicago just to expose them to the world a little bit. Remember, we didn't have cell phones and all kinds of TV coverage and that sort of thing. And I think that's something that they always remember because so many of them had never been out of Vermilion County. They had never eaten in a nice sit-down restaurant. They'd never seen an escalator or ridden on one. They'd never seen a skyscraper. It was all new to them. And when I run into those people, and I still do, that's the first thing they always mention is how much fun they had and what they learned on that trip. And we felt like we kind of opened their eyes to a little bigger world than just Vermilion County.
Well, I think there's been so many. I think it's flexibility. I think in the beginning, when Mary Miller started the college in the 3rd floor of Danville High School, their mission was transfer education. And then when she moved out here, she was very aggressive into getting us into career and technical education to meet the workforce needs. And then along came economic development and workforce development, and the college has been a leader in that. And so I think probably what the community looks for is the college being flexible and meeting the needs that are the community's facing at that time.
Well, I think it can help people in many ways. They just don't have the extra money for the tuition at the time, or it means they can take one more class or whatever. I did want to make note here of the fact that when we started as the U of I, extension of the U of I, the tuition was $5 a credit hour. This past year, the tuition is $160 a credit hour, which really is fairly low compared to all the other community colleges. Well, but with this tuition inflation that comes since we moved to this campus, most of our students need some help to pay for books, to pay for tuition, that sort of thing. When we moved to this campus in 1965, there were 10 scholarships available. And I'm pleased to say that this last month or so, when we had the Honors Day program, there were 506 scholarships awarded. That's tremendous, but we still need more help for our students.
Well, the foundation changed because over the years they've had very, very good leadership, and the presidents that were involved in the college and the board of trustees and the foundation board have been advocates for this college. But I also think the community realizes what a valuable asset Danville Area Community College is and how many thousands of lives it's transformed. And no doubt the workforce of Vermilion County, all the employers, need trained individuals with skill sets that the college is providing, whether it's in business, whether it's in industry, whether it's in healthcare. It's Danville Area Community College that are giving them the folks to start their careers and to actually add skills to their workforce. So that's why I think everybody's willing to invest in the college.
One of the things I'd like to do during this interview is to pay tribute to the person who's responsible for DACC's very existence, an incredible Danville educator named Mary Miller. She had a dream of a two-year college that would provide a chance for all. And I considered her a role model and a mentor for me. She devoted her life to making this college successful. She never gave up. Sometimes she ruled with an iron hand, but she was respected by everyone. And you know, there's one thing that I didn't really think about until after she passed away, and that was this. When she came here to this campus in 1965, she was 65 years old. That's retirement age for most of us. But she never thought about retirement. She kept working just as hard as she could. Continued the long hours to see her dream become a reality, which it did. And I mentioned earlier the book that she wrote with the history, but then as a side note, in 2002, at the suggestion of DACC board chair Vicki Miller, rhetoric instructor Martha Kay started collecting stories and memories about those early years, the things that don't go into official documents, but the stories that go around and so on. And some of these stories Miss Miller probably never knew, never heard about. But the book is called A Second Chance, and it was dedicated to Miss Miller, who gave us all a chance. The proceeds from the sale of this went to the DACC scholarship. So even our retirees and current employees were still thinking about when they bought this book. And I heard a lot of people say it was a page turner. I couldn't put it down last night. I was up till 3. I couldn't stop. And there are a lot of, and these stories are true, they're in here, but a lot of them are pretty funny.